that covers bankruptcies, foreclosures, things like that.
That's correct.
And that's why you were on the show before talking about how people could save their homes.
That's right.
And maintain their lifestyle. So let's speak about that in terms of the Chapter 13. Well, let's go over the chapters again. We'll get into Chapter 13 and how people can avoid foreclosure. I know it's a good economy, but there's still people suffering out there.
Correct. The 3 chapters we discussed last time I was on the show were Chapter 7, Chapter 13, and Chapter 11. Briefly, Chapter 7 is a liquidation where the debtor, the individual who files bankruptcy, basically decides to let go of everything. He or she says, I don't have anything, I don't care. If I do have it, the creditors can have it. And he files bankruptcy, and within 3 months he can walk away from all his debts.
I see.
Now, obviously it's never that easy in any case, but we can give the basics on TV.
Yeah, right.
The Chapter 11 is more for the corporations and the large entities, but due to the higher amount of debt that we're seeing because of the secured debt values, secured meaning debt attached to a property or a car or something a lender can collect to recover on, those secured debts are pretty high these days because of the values of the properties. And an individual could file a Chapter 11 for that reason.
I see.
I think in today's economy, what I'm seeing are many Chapter 13s. And the Chapter 13 is sometimes called a reorganization, but in actuality it's called a wage earner's bankruptcy. And it's called a wage earner's bankruptcy because the individual that files bankruptcy must have sufficient wages to put together a plan to pay its creditors, and the plan must be feasible.
Now, by wage earner, that means they are still working.
They're still working, correct.
Okay.
Now, there are times we've been able to say he's not working, but he's receiving financial help from a family member or whatever. But in most cases, we have to show that the individual has sufficient income to make a payment plan to these creditors. So, for example, if an individual was facing a foreclosure, okay, and he'll call his local bankruptcy attorney and say, hey, I got a foreclosure coming up, but I want to keep my house, so the attorney will tell him, hey, you know what, file your bankruptcy, let's stop the foreclosure sale, but the main question is, can you afford your mortgage payment? Can you afford paying back the payments you've missed? And the individual has to really think about that, and that's where his wages or his income would come into play.
And that played a big role in everybody driving off into the sunset, leaving their home behind.
Right. Exactly. There's, the problem is you have to be realistic. If you haven't paid a mortgage payment in a few years, and maybe the bank forgot about you, and then one day they wake up and say, hey, by the way, you're behind about $200,000. Without a successful modification on the loan, how are you going to pay back that $200,000? So this individual has to show that he has sufficient income to pay that back.
Sure.
In a Chapter 13, your goal is put a plan together. It's a few pages, it's a plan. It basically says who gets paid, what they get paid, when they get paid, and what percentage are they getting paid. In a Chapter 13, it's a payment plan that can be created over 36 months or 60 months, depending on the rules that apply. It can be a 3-year payment plan or a 5-year payment plan. A successful modification is a bankruptcy filed, stopping a foreclosure, allowing the individual to pay its mortgage payment, and also pay back all the arrearages or missed payments on the mortgage over 5 years.
Okay, question. When my son was in Little League, one of the Little League fathers was a bankruptcy judge.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So what is the judge? It's a benched judge, right? There's no jury. It's just he's calling the shots.
Right.
So when you go to court, is he reading all these plans or suggesting these plans, or is he approving? They're forcing people to do certain...
It's a step-by-step process. So initially the debtor, the individual, will contact the attorney. Attorney files bankruptcy. Okay, the bankruptcy, the actual packet is about, I'll say this thick, about an inch thick. It's like going to escrow. Go to an escrow office and sign documents, right? And the first few pages are your voluntary petition. You sign it, you file it, and you're in bankruptcy. Then you have 2 weeks initially to file the balance of your packet. And that includes schedules, your income, your assets, your liabilities have to all be provided in this bankruptcy petition, the full petition. Then you file your plan. Now, the plan is filed with your intention of how you propose to pay these creditors back. And your schedules will show your income. So this income and the schedules versus the plan are the documents that are going to be reviewed by somebody called the trustee. Okay? The trustee receives income based on the money that's distributed to creditors. A percentage.
I see. So the third person
Right.
is getting involved.
Correct. And they're reviewing these documents looking for feasibility, and they're also looking for any issues or concerns they may have as to the way the plan was drafted, as to feasibility, as to if the creditors are being taken care of and how much are they getting paid. Maybe they should be getting paid more, maybe they should be getting paid less. This is the trustee who's reviewing these documents.
Okay.
So the individual who files bankruptcy very rarely will ever see a judge. There's really only one meeting they go for, and it's called a meeting of creditors. And that's about maybe a month or two after your bankruptcy filing. That's where you and your attorney will go sit down in a room, and the trustee will ask the individual to raise their right hand, make sure they're telling the truth, and ask them for their blood type, and no, I'm just joking. But they'll ask him about the petition, make sure that's their address and everything they've listed is true. It's an examination. In most Chapter 13s, it's no longer than 10 minutes, maybe.
I see. Okay.
If you're in a Chapter 11, you could have like an hour or two, depending on who shows up, maybe an IRS.
Now, this fine drawing here, we have the house, and we have a shield around it with the number 13 above it. So that's our Chapter 13, protecting our house.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what are these acronyms here?
Well, I want to thank the artist for drawing this beautiful picture over there.
Yeah, we have to have somebody sign that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, in the most simplest sense of terms, a bankruptcy is filed to stop collection actions by a creditor. So in this particular picture, the house was about to be foreclosed on, and the bankruptcy was filed to protect it. That's the circle around it. So when that bankruptcy is filed, the lender cannot foreclose on it. They can't take that house, okay? Because when a bankruptcy is filed, it creates this protection called the automatic stay. So it automatically goes into place, and a staying all the collection actions happens. So this house is protected.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean they're protected forever. Now, a lender could come back and tell the judge, Your Honor, hey, wait a minute. You're protecting this house, but we're not making any money. We're not getting paid our payments. So we want to be able to go through the stay, go through the protection, and take that home. Okay? So what happens at that point is the lender files something called relief of stay. They want relief from the protection. They want to be able to go in and take that property. Okay? So in the sense of a 13, we as attorneys would have to argue and say, no, you know what, you can't do that. This client is going to put a plan together where he can pay everybody back, or he's got a job, or he's going to short sell the property. So we try to find time and an argument in different ways.
Okay.
Two of the things I've been seeing a lot of, first of all, because I don't agree with the media, there are people suffering. There are homes going to foreclosure.
Sure, absolutely.
We're not in a super economy.
They've been hanging on all this time.
They've been there's people coming in that haven't paid a mortgage in 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, 1 year. It's.
You don't see it. You drive by them all the time.
You drive by them. They're mowing their lawn. They're painting their house. You wouldn't know they haven't paid their mortgage in 5 years. You wouldn't have known that.
Yeah.
But the two issues that come up is they've applied for modifications over and over, and then they come to the point where they're like, we're in a modification, but the lender hasn't denied us or approved us, and our foreclosure's on Friday. What do we do? We're scared. We don't want to wait for the foreclosure to happen. Well, you wonder. You're saying you've applied for a mod so many times, and they end up saying, yeah, we've applied for a modification. They either lose the documents or they want more documents, and the lender, the communication with them is not going as well.
That was always the problem dealing with these banks during the Great Recession or any recession. You get a different employee every time. They don't do the proper notes. They misplace the documents. So that's happening with these loan modifications as well.
Right. They're definitely doing better. The banks are doing better because you get a point of contact, and there's different rules that were in play.
A case manager, so to
right.
speak.
But at the same time, there's still clients out there who don't trust the system, and they're just scared.
Yeah.
So once we file the bankruptcy, it gives them the breathing room that they won't lose the home.
Now, do the phone calls stop? That's part of the ads you see all the time or hear on the radio. Stop those
Yes.
ads.
They cannot get collection calls. The collectors cannot call them during a bankruptcy.
That has to be a huge relief for the family.
It is because, it's enough that they get the calls every day for debt collectors, and debt collectors can be aggressive. They're not the nicest people.
Right.
So when you stop them, it's a better feeling.
Right, and they're professional debt collectors often, right? They farm them out to
Right, there's professionals
collection.
out there, and they're aggressive. They don't care how the other person feels on the phone.
Sure.
They're not very
Sure.
polished individuals at times. But what can happen, what we've been doing is we've been filing the bankruptcy, and then we've been having our clients on their own, either through the bank or whatever, file their modification again after the bankruptcy's been filed.
I see.
And what we do is in the plan, we tell the judge, Your Honor, we're going to propose a plan payment, okay, to cover our creditors, but we're also going to propose a modification payment, a mortgage modification payment. So, for example, let's say your mortgage payment's $5,000. We're going to propose a payment that could happen if the modification happens. So we're going to pay $2,000 to our lender a month. Okay? What does that do for the debtor? It gives the debtor the ability to pay a smaller mortgage payment. Okay? And during that time period, while the modification is pending with the bank, this individual, this debtor, gets to make that lower payment.
Sure.
Now, there's two things that could happen at the end. If they're denied, they got to sell the property or turn it in. If it's approved, they continue making that payment.
Now, oftentimes are those graduated where the first year that's $2,000 a month, the second year it's $2,200 a month, the third year it's $20,000. Do you do graduated payments like that, or you just lock it down?
So, the payments I just discussed were for the mortgage payment.
Right.
Okay. That goes to the lender directly.
Yes, but the lender might say, well, that's a third of what you're supposed to be paying.
Well, he could say it's a third, but we usually file a modification application at the time.
Yes.
So, and then we file a declaration telling the judge and everybody else, look, we're in a pending modification, so we're going to pay this lower payment. And if it gets denied, we'll sell, or we'll try to figure out how to pay back the 5 years of missed payments over 5 years.
Now, oftentimes that 5 years of missed payments they could put on the back of the loan.
That's through the lender.
Yeah.
The bankruptcy won't change the terms of,
I
of
see.
the
Okay.
Yeah,
Got
the
it.
bankruptcy doesn't
Okay.
affect those terms. It
Right.
can't make changes to
Sure.
the lender's paperwork.
Okay.
But the payment you're discussing, the payment plan, the graduated payment plan, that is how much money is going to be paid back to all creditors.
I see.
So that could be your credit cards, that could be your missed payments on your mortgage. If you decide not to do, a modification, you can pay back the lender the arrears payments over 5 years.
Got it. Okay.
The problem comes up when you owe $200,000 in missed payments. How do you afford that? 5 years is not enough.
Yeah. So these are people that have really been hanging on to their home. They didn't give up like a lot of folks. And they are now doing everything in their power to keep the house. And they will pay it back. But now, in terms of that's keeping the house, what about the other creditors?
The other creditors involve credit cards, medical bills, different items that are unsecured. Now, unsecured debt is debt that's not connected to a piece of property, not connected
correct.
to real estate or a car.
Right.
Depending on the individual's income and assets, that will dictate how much those creditors receive. They could receive 10 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar, everything or nothing. Because they're unsecured, they don't get a guaranteed amount. Okay? The secured, such as the mortgage and the cars, they'll get paid. And priority tax debt will get paid 100%. Okay? Now, in addition to modifications, there's a program which is relatively new called the mortgage. It's called MMM actually, mortgage modification mediation program.
Okay.
I think I got it wrong, but it's a mortgage program.
Got it, okay.
A modification program within the bankruptcy court.
Sure.
And what happens is that you apply for a modification while in bankruptcy, but you do it in a more transparent way. So you provide your documents into a portal online, and those documents are provided to the lender. So there's full transparency between the lender and the debtor as to what documents are being gone through and the communications.
Now, is that also for the case manager or the third party that's, are they involved in that as well?
There's somebody on the other side dealing with it.
Okay,
Okay, and all communication is through this portal.
interesting.
So there's never any, oh, I thought I sent this to you, or I didn't send this to you. This is all
You're all
transparent.
looking at the same documents.
Exactly. Now, none of these are guaranteed success, but this does make it easier on the debtors filing for a modification.
Okay.
So I mean,
Now, this LM, what is
that's loan modifications.
loan modification?
That's the standard loan modifications that everybody heard about. And once you file bankruptcy, you can start a new application with your lender. But that's the standard one, and this is the one where we'd use the portal.
So this is really what you're seeing now. Even though the economy's hot, they were trying to do loan modifications before they met you. They meet somebody like you, and you file Chapter 13. And then eventually you're going to have the mortgage mediation meetings.
Right. Well, it is what I'm seeing now. There are foreclosures picking up. There are people who have been denied modifications, and there are people who are trying for modifications again, and there are people who haven't paid mortgages in so long that they would really, really need to get a successful modification in order to make up for all the missed payments that they've had.
What in a good economy like this, coming out of a recession, what are some of the scenarios that you would see? Of course, we don't.
Well, some scenarios involve a person, again, who's tried a modification numerous times, never
Yes.
happened.
It's
They
a-
want to file a bankruptcy and file for a modification again. There's people who,
In terms of the makeup, let's say a single parent.
no, it's
Usually
usually
a
a
couple.
couple who's, maybe someone lost a job.
During the
and-
recession.
And during the recession, now they
Sure.
got a job again, so they want to try to fix things.
Right.
So they want to try to stop the foreclosure and put together a payment plan. There's individuals like that. There's some individuals who have been doing it for years. They've done it for 3 or 4 years trying to get a modification, or maybe filed bankruptcy 2 times before.
Now, oftentimes people think, okay, we're doing this, but they're driving expensive cars and taking expensive vacations. That's typically not the case. These people are really hurting, as a rule.
Well,
Depends.
majority of them are.
Yes, okay, but there's still some people working the system.
There's definitely people working the system.
Okay,
There's definitely people that use bankruptcy for a strategic purpose,
I see.
and they're the ones driving the Bentleys.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a different scenario with them, and they could be the ones starting with the Chapter 11, converting to a Chapter 7, dismissing their case, refiling again. There's individuals out there with 10 bankruptcies under their belt. There's different people that use different parts of the system.
I see. Okay.
But the most common individual that's using, or a couple that's using use a bankruptcy, is using it for relief.
Now, when you meet with people, they come into your office, you go over, what does a meeting go like when they come and consult with you? Do you speak about the 3 different?
We discussed the
popular-
3 different bankruptcies. We usually review their assets, their income, and their debt. And within about 20 or 30 minutes, we can tell the type of chapter that would work
I
best.
see. Okay.
And then the second meeting, they come back in. Based on that chapter, they have to provide all their documentation. And we start to prepare their schedules. And the third meeting, they come in and they sign the schedules, and we file it.
I see.
Now, it's not always that you have all that time, because it
Yeah.
could be you meet on a Thursday and the foreclosure on a Friday morning. So we have to do something called an emergency bankruptcy. And another thing that's required before you file bankruptcy, you have to do an online course, either on the phone or online, and that's about an hour and a half or 2
Wow.
hours on financials.
So if it's a married couple, they have to
they have to do it
both?
together. Yeah,
do
they'll
so it's 3 hours.
right. They'll do it together, and
Well, I mean, would a married couple have to sit in front of
a
the
computer
husband
screen.
would sit in front of one, and he does, Mr. Johnson does his, and then
Yeah.
Mrs. Johnson does hers.
Correct.
And then you had mentioned in the other show that you could file online. So once they complete those courses, because we know in real estate people wait to the last minute.
Oh yeah, totally.
And then you bring in their paperwork and you say, I've had it during the Great Recession. I'm looking at paperwork and the sale date was a month ago.
Yeah.
And it's probably a new owner. And they don't even know it.
Right, right.
So, but nowadays it's online. You could file that stay.
Well, so you can file in federal bankruptcy court online. So what happens is I would receive their certificate of the class, and we would attach that to the petition. That's where it goes. But generally, once they sign their physical documents from my office, I type it up and I file it. So I filed the last foreclosure. I filed a foreclosure for my client's Chapter 11 from the hospital, and my baby was being born.
Wow, on your laptop or
on my
something,
laptop,
yeah.
So it was pretty interesting. It was
Now,
the night before the foreclosure.
Now, I take it this is a consumer protection class, so that course that they're taking online is letting people know, you sure you want to do this?
You
Do you
sure you
understand
want
what
to do
you're
this?
doing? This?
Right. Why are you here? What do your financials look like? What caused you to file bankruptcy? Different issues like that. But it's important. It's important to know the ramifications of a bankruptcy. Your credit gets shot. You're going to be in this bankruptcy 3 or 5 years. You're going to be limited. You're not going to have credit. It's important to know that too. It's not just a done deal. Consumer protection, for that matter, you really want to know what you're getting into. So sometimes I try to tell clients, look, maybe you don't want a bankruptcy.
Yes.
Especially if it's a client that doesn't have any real estate. Maybe they just have like credit card debt or something. I do suggest to them, if they have a little amount of cash saved and they have a lot of credit card debt, I might suggest, why don't you try negotiating with your creditors, maybe paying them a lump sum and getting rid of your debt versus filing for a bankruptcy.
So that's called settled, paid in full, or a settlement where they pay their credit cards off 10 cents on a dollar, 50 cents on a dollar.
Like a debt settlement?
Debt settlement?
Yeah.
Okay. You had mentioned in the past when they were starting this, the home was upside down and their mortgages went through the roof.
Right.
But now maybe the house has doubled in value.
Right.
And now they have equity.
Right.
But they've still got a big payment. They've still got economic woes. Maybe a spouse lost the work, and then, of course, medical bills and whatnot. So they might have a lot of equity in the house, or they might not.
Correct.
Does it matter?
It depends on if you have a lot of debt and you have a lot of equity, you might be required to pay a larger amount of your debt back. Okay?
Okay.
But if you have, if you have a lot of debt and you can't afford the house, you might use the bankruptcy to stop a foreclosure to allow you time to update the home or whatever to sell it and get more money for your house.
At what point does somebody force the homeowner to sell? Does the judge do that, or the mediator, or is it just who makes?
Well, you can either sell it yourself, you ask for the court's approval, or a lender might be pushing you to get through the protection so they could foreclose. So you have no option but to kind of negotiate a deal and say, look, I don't want you to foreclose, but give me a little time to sell the house.
Now, could the judge intervene and say, it's time for you people to sell? You and your lawyer. Does that ever happen? Or
he could possibly, but I don't know if he'll force the sale. He might allow the creditor to come in and foreclose.
Okay, so that's what I'm speaking about. What makes eventually that home on the market?
Well,
or the mechanism to have a sign on the lawn and now it's officially for sale.
Well, it could be the creditor has tried numerous times to work with the individual to sell the property, or the individual's not keeping up on their payments. Because just because you file bankruptcy doesn't mean they stop making their mortgage payments. Once you file BK, you have to start paying your mortgage payments again.
I see. Okay, so it could go into foreclosure and foreclose, or the occupants can just throw up their hand and say, okay, let's sell it. We have some equity. Let's put it on the market and sell it.
Right. Let's use the bankruptcy to prevent the foreclosure and buy ourselves time to sell that property.
Okay, now that's a great tool.
That's a wonderful tool, and that's a huge tool these days.
And you've done a lot of that, I believe.
That is a lot. That is a lot. So you don't really stay in your Chapter 13 for 3 or 5 years. You're pretty much there for 6 or 7 months to allow the sale of the property, and then you dismiss your case.
To get your house in order. Now, probably one of your strategies is helping them say, down the road, you want to be able to buy a car and buy a house and have a decent interest rate.
Correct.
So do we want to drag this out, or do we want to take care of it now.
Exactly, and you want to take care of it now because the market's good, right? I might say, look, it's January, and let's buy you a few months, so summertime you get more money. So we file the BK in January. We try to hang out and buy as much time as possible through the courts or with the creditors to get to about May, April, and sell the house then.
Now, I think we spoke in the past where the families have told you, listen, to go rent a place, it's more than our mortgage.
Right.
So we can, pay now or pay later, right?
Exactly. I mean, there's times they might say, oh, my payment has gone up. I said, well, good luck finding a place to rent for any cheaper than that. If you can't afford the mortgage, you more likely than not cannot afford the rent in this area. So unless you're willing to move somewhere out of the area, you kind of need to make a decision.
Yes, and a lot of that could be the loan modification.
It could be the modification, correct.
Now, of course, they have to pay their attorneys. Do they pay up front? Do they pay in this process? Is it depending on the attorney?
Well, in Chapter 13, the courts have guidelines as to what we can charge.
I see. Okay.
And then in most cases, the debtor, the individual filing bankruptcy, can put a down payment on attorney's fees.
I see.
And the balance of it will come through that same plan that pays the creditors back.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
works out well.
Vinod, you're always a great guest.
Thank you for having me.
Please come back soon.
You got it. Thanks.
Thanks again for watching Kapowich on Real Estate. This is a program dedicated to consumer protection within the residential real estate arena. We will see you next week. Thanks again.